Our next course is Checker Nights. For this one, I think I'll use the wheelie bike. The wheelie bike, and by extension all other bikes and King Deity, also have another unique trait to them. Since they're not floating, you don't have to worry about actually tapping A over dash panels or other panel types. So you basically only have to worry about steering, so it takes even less control in some ways, but the downside is we don't have a glide. One thing I was trying to do is, right at the first boost panel, there's actually a secret passageway that you can break through a wall. It's actually very tricky to break through because you need a lot of speed. With other vehicles, you might have to double tap A to build up enough speed to actually get through that. But I was hoping with the wheelie bike, maybe we would be able to get through it first try. And since this is a 2-lap race, I don't know how easily I'll be able to show this off. Also, this part always throws me off with these little boost panels that also cause you to perform a spin attack by default. Basically, the problem with that is it's very difficult to boost while also going up a spiral path because of just how much you're having to charge up boosts elsewhere. There's also a little lip here that you can jump off of in some cases to actually skip this wall here, but I do feel like with certain vehicles like the wheelie bike, it's a little bit more complicated. It's definitely easier if you're using an ability that can glide, and especially for other modes that we'll talk about before too long, you basically have to get really good at these shortcuts in order to have a chance at actually breaking certain records. It's actually very difficult if you go for some of the bonus content, even though the main game isn't that bad, I say as I also just got 2nd and 3rd, respectively, in 2 recent races. Wheelie is also an unusual copy ability, which makes sense because of the wheelie bike being the partner character for it. It also has the same attribute of the wheelie bike, where you actually touch the ground at all times, so in some cases, if you're using like the Warp Star or some other vehicle not on the ground, there are benefits to actually having the wheel ability for certain sections. It's also worth mentioning that in that grind rail section previously, the golden parts of the rails will actually speed you up, so you'll actually want to hold down the buttons if you aren't using a wheelie bike. You also have Bomb, which is very interesting. I'm trying to remember if this is actually the first game that gave Bomb this particular hat, but I think it might have been Superstar actually. Let's try again for this shortcut. I completely missed it entirely, but again, that's basically required if you want to go for like time trials. There's also a switch here that causes this middle section to raise up, which is a way to slow down your opponents right before the end of the race. And the final course in Air Ride is Nebula Belt, which is actually the only unlockable course. For this one, let's use the Formula Star. The Formula Star has some of the one of the highest top speeds of any of the Air Ride machines, but your obvious downside is it's a lot harder to steer. Nebula Belt is very interesting because there are no actual enemies. The only way to get copy abilities is through the copy roulettes. In a lot of ways, I feel like they were trying to go for a Rainbow Road vibe with the space setting and the sort of more like skill-based section rather than having as many like gimmicks as some of the previous stages. In general though, I feel like it's almost too straightforward, but that goes for a lot of Air Ride. But again, that was one of the major criticisms of this game, was just that it was a little bit too simplistic at times. By the way, I've also completely forgotten to mention that you can actually use the C-stick to change the camera. You can also zoom it in and out a little bit as well, which can definitely be good if you're trying to like look ahead or see like if anyone's right next to you, for example. But again, this particular stage is very straightforward without any enemies. The AI is definitely having a hard time keeping up with us with the Formula Star. It's also a vehicle that has a harder time getting to its top speed, but once you get to that top speed, and if you can maintain it, then you probably won't have any trouble going forward. But again, in some races, like obviously the more windy ones, this would not be a great choice of a vehicle because it is so hard to turn with this particular star. Again, it's very interesting how much the different vehicles actually have different playstyles and are very interesting to try to get used to if you're used to a very specific playstyle. So again, there's a lot of variety with the vehicle types, but again, the core gameplay is still relatively unchanged, other than certain attributes like some being inherently better at certain tasks than others, and we barely even saw all of them. There's still quite a few that we'll save for another mode coming up later on, but that takes care of the final race. So that was a quick look at all of the air ride courses. Next up, I wanted to go over the settings briefly by pressing Z. Here you can actually change between a time limit or a lap limit. There's an auto mode, but you can also set laps manually. By the way, to unlock the Nebula Belt course, you have to play a total of 100 laps. So hypothetically, you could just set a Fantasy Meadows race to 99 laps and unlock that very easily if you wanted to, and you can also set the time to 99 minutes as well. You can turn damage on or off. Obviously, if you KO someone, they're out of the race, so it kind of makes it more of a survival race. You can also change the speed help setting to basically determine how much your machine will speed up as you fall behind, essentially rubber banding based on other games. I wish more racing games had a setting like this, if I'm being completely honest, but you can also turn enemies off and change the game speed, though to be fair, I almost feel like the game is slow enough that it's really not necessary. I almost wish there was a way to speed it up rather than slow it down. You can also change it so you can actually have the last place person of the previous race choose the next course if you're playing with human players. But that was a quick look at the options. Next up, I wanted to look at the free run mode. This is essentially the time trial mode. There are two options, time attack and free run. Time attack basically involves going through the courses, all set to 3 laps, as quickly as possible. You do have enemies, and obviously you want to defeat them along the way to gain small boosts in speed, but overall this is just a test of how fast you can get through the courses. But there's also free run mode that doesn't have enemies, but you're trying to set the best lap time, so you basically can go around the course as much as you want and try to set the best lap. The game does track both of these in the records option. You might notice some inconsistencies in the records that I'll explain momentarily, but finally, the part of this mode is the checklist. This is very interesting because this would essentially become a staple in a lot of Sakurai's games going forward. We have all these little objectives that you can fill out. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I do want to highlight that each of the tracks has alternate music. We actually heard the alternate music for one of the courses, unfortunately, because I almost feel like it's more interesting hearing the new music, but you can hold X or Y on the select course screen to toggle the alternate music. So for example, for Nebula Belt, you have the Fountain of Dreams from Nightmare in Dreamland, though you could also say it's from Melee because it was actually used there before Nightmare in Dreamland. For Beanstalk Park, you have the tutorial music from Kirby Superstar. Here you can also see all of the vehicles you can unlock, so for the wheelie bike you have to play all the standard courses. For Checker Knights it should be a remix of Green Greens, which again almost sounds more like the Smash Bros version rather than the traditional version. This is also how you unlock the alternate Kirby colors in some cases, but it's a very interesting way to add more replay value. And to tell the truth, a lot of these particular challenges are incredibly difficult. The reason some of the times on the previous menu might not add up is partially because I actually downloaded a save with the completed checklist, but I decided to try to actually fulfill the time requirements in this checklist myself and wasn't exactly successful for some, like Magma Flows. By the way, the alternate song for this is one of the Revenge of Meta Knight songs. If I'm not mistaken, this one is actually the second one, and the first one is actually used for a different stage. You also have a bonus movie for gliding for more than 1 hour. We'll watch that in a bit. But again, this is a nice way to extend the life of the game because the air ride mode itself is pretty straightforward and there's not a lot to it. For Sky Sands, it should be the arena song from Superstar, and for Fantasy Meadows, it should be Spring Breeze from Kirby Superstar as well. You can also notice another trend with Sakurai's games, that he tends to favor his own games. Also, Frozen Hillside should be Rainbow Resort from Kirby's Adventure, which is actually a personal favorite song of mine from the series. But yeah, you'll notice a lot of the recurring elements of Air Ride do originate from Adventure, Dreamland, and Superstar. For Celestial Valley, it should be the forest music from Kirby's Adventure. There are a couple of songs from 64, but he also voiced Dedede in that, even though he didn't direct it. So the only Kirby games that really don't have much representation in general are Dreamland 2 and 3, and obviously a lot of the other spin-offs like Dream Course and others. We didn't even get to some of the Air Ride machines, but we'll show them off in a bit. For Meta Knight, you have to glide for more than 30 minutes, which is actually not that bad, all things considered. But again, I do feel like Meta Knight is one of the better characters in this particular game. Again, it is nice having handicap settings, so if one person's really good with a character or a vehicle, you might want to lower their handicap setting to give everyone else a fighting chance, which is also definitely representative of a recurring theme in Sakurai's games of trying to make them very accessible, oftentimes potentially to a fault. For Machine Passage, it should be the other Revenge of Meta Knight song, and also it's worth mentioning that in some cases you'll unlock the purple squares on the left that you can actually use to fill any box of your choice. So, again, this is a mechanic that would later return in the Smash Bros. Games, for example. And I want to say Kid Icarus Uprising, but it's honestly been so long since I've played that game, I may be mistaken. But yeah, a lot of these time attack and free run times are actually incredibly strict. So, again, if you thought the main game and just the core racing of the game is a little bit too easy, these will definitely give you a bit of a challenge. For Dedede, you have to defeat 1,000 enemies in Air Ride mode, and also for getting 100 of the 120 squares filled in, you'll actually unlock a special video, which we'll show at the end. And to conclude this look at the Air Ride mode, I want to head back to the main menu and actually go to the options, where I want to show two special videos. We have the machine intros that's unlocked by default, And finally, we have the special characters and machines. As a reminder, this is unlocked by having an hour of gliding time in the air ride mode, and also 3 of the 5 things shown off in this video we'll be seeing in a future mode. But that concludes this quick look at the air ride mode. So next time, we'll be tackling the top ride mode. So thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more Kirby Air Ride.